I grew up in a traditional classroom. I sat for hours a day listening to teachers who stood at the front of the classroom talk information at me while I wrote it down in my notebook. I was successful at it because I have a great memory and I can retain and recall information on cue. The problem came when I graduated from college and began practicing as an architect. I knew that in my brain there was information, primarily from math, that I could definitely use and apply in the problems that I was facing when designing and constructing buildings. However, now that I was outside the context of a classroom, it was difficult for me to know how to apply that knowledge in a way that was useful to me in my job. So now that I'm presented with a constructivist pedagogy, I have come to recognize the value in allowing students to create and construct their own knowledge in a relevant and useful way that makes sense to them as students. So if I'm guided by a constructivist pedagogy, as a teacher, what I want to do is create a learning environment that provides students with experiences that allow them to construct new knowledge by building upon and remodeling their existing knowledge. So constructivist pedagogy really starts with the students. It's important for me to know who my students are, know where I want to take them, and to know how I'm going to get them there, so that ultimately when we're at our destination, they can tell me that they're in charge of their learning. So when trying to figure out who my students are, what's important is being able to understand what their present conceptions are. So where are we starting from? What is their foundation to learning? What ideas do they have about their existing knowledge? And I need to honor the fact that all of my students have different perspectives. So my classroom will be filled with multiple perspectives of the world and of what they see. And using that understanding of where they currently are and the present knowledge that they have, it's my responsibility to create relevance for them. And when I say create relevance for them, it doesn't necessarily mean that because Johnny likes motorcycles or Amy likes cooking, that my classroom lessons will be surrounded or revolve around those items. Yes, that is one way of being able to create relevance for them, but I can also be able to create relevance for them by challenging them, by presenting them with new problems, new questions that spark their interest. So it's really the way that I present to them those problems. So I need to either build upon who they are or create that environment for them that makes them want to learn or want to understand what we're learning at the time. And part of that revolves around the understanding that really learning is a journey. As a math student, I was always taught in a very linear fashion. I can't solve problems unless I understand my arithmetic. And I can't understand my arithmetic if I don't understand the basics of adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. However, really, learning is a journey. And it's a journey based on where students' present knowledge is at. And based on that present knowledge, how they're going to formulate and create new learning that based on that journey. So when creating experiences for them that get them excited about learning, that help them wonder about how the learning will change their current way of thinking, I want that to be able to get them to create questions of their own, to pose their own problems that they want to solve. And I do that by helping them to see the connections between things. So this becomes where, as a teacher, I present big ideas. I present broad concepts for them that connect their learning. So it would be interdisciplinary, where that connection in their learning includes and involves and integrates all of the subjects that they're learning, so that they can see how they're connected, and they're encouraged and motivated to investigate those big ideas and to ask questions about those big ideas in order to enhance their knowledge, in order to get them to take what they're currently thinking or their present ideas and transform it into new knowledge. And part of that journey is helping me to understand and helping get them to understand that failure is a part of learning, and failure is really a part of helping you to build that knowledge, because it teaches you that one way works, so it's time to try another way. And I need to, as a teacher, help them up when they fail and help them determine what pathway to take next by watching their progress and helping them get to their destination as positively as possible. And so when I connect this back to my own life, I realized that when I first started teaching, I got out of the architecture business and I started teaching. I began teaching exactly the same way that I learned. So my first year in a classroom, I set it up as if I was a traditional teacher. I required my students to take notes while I stood at the front of the classroom, in front of the whiteboard, did multiple problems, had them try problems, until I realized that, look, this was the exact reason and the exact problem that I had when I got out of school and I started working. That this doesn't work. That really what's important is for me to facilitate their learning. So I was able to change from a traditional pedagogy to a constructivist pedagogy by presenting problems to students and guiding them as they solve those problems. For example, if I wanted students to be able to figure out the classic train problem, where a train leaves a station and an hour later another train leaves the station. For most students, it's just a matter of, I'm going to give you the example and I'm going to give you the information and we're going to draw a diagram and we're going to apply a formula. But that doesn't help them when it's now a train that's leaving the station going in one direction, and another train leaves the station 2 hours later going in the other direction. How far apart are they? So it's all about being able to apply the same knowledge to a different context. And when I'm able to create an environment where all their understanding is that this is really a problem that's solving distance apart from each other, and help them to discover the ways that they can measure distance based on movement of a train, a plane, a boat, a vehicle, of them walking on a bike, then they're able to apply that knowledge in a way that makes sense to them. So as a teacher, I began to see that value, and I began to change my way of teaching as the years progressed. So 10 years later, I guess I'm happy to see that I do understand what a constructivist pedagogy is, and that I have been applying it correctly in my classroom. So now, in conclusion, if I go back to what I started with, where I talked about how as an architect it was difficult for me to apply the knowledge that I had learned in a traditional classroom. Eventually I figured out the problem because I had to persevere at it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job. But to me, it was frustrating because it would have been so much easier for me to solve this kind of problem if I had been taught in a constructivist classroom where I was able to create my own knowledge through experiences and investigations that were relevant to the real world, whether it was relevant to something that I was passionate about or just relevant to the world that I lived in. That is what's important. So, although it was difficult, I eventually persevered and would find the solution. But it's a lot easier if I had been given a context of big ideas and how all of the little parts connected to each other so that I would be able to be a problem solver on my own, in my own terms. Thank you.